Here we have Tanya, a rising senior from Memorial High School, Frisco, and she's done competitional debate. She will be telling us a few key do's on public speaking for beginners.
Hi Anya, thanks for having me on your show. There are several different things you can do to accentuate your speech. My first one would be do maintain positive eye contact. And what I mean by that is rather than staring at one specific spot, instead pick 3 or so spots among the audience to switch between. Also, in addition to that, when maintaining eye contact, try not to look away from the audience for more than a few seconds at a time, whether it be to your script or to a presentation if you're using one of those. Because maintaining that connection between your audience and your speaker is really vital in transferring whatever message you're trying to relay. And my second do would be mindful of the tone you're going for within the speech, and use your words to heighten that tone. Try to avoid words such as just, or really, or literally when speaking. And my final do would be do identify your crutch words, which are words you usually use, and repetitive messages, and try to remove them from your scripts. These words and ideas are often repeat themselves when we're mentally processing and making the speech. But just because you're unaware that you commonly use them, it doesn't mean your audience won't notice the repetition of these phrases and themes in your speech. And I would recommend that everyone who is listening here at least try them out. Try to practice and improve your abilities, because public speaking, like many other things, is something that can only be improved with practice.
Thank you for sharing those insightful tips. We also have Nevin, a rising senior from Plano East High School, who has done competitional debate for the last 6 years and is the captain of the speech and debate program of his school. Now let's hear his tips on advanced public speaking.
Hi, my name is Nevin. We're going to be talking about a few key topics within this area. So, parallel sentence structure, previewing and reviewing, inflection variants, moving, and bullet points as opposed to scripts. So first, parallelism. You may have heard of it in English class, but generally, parallel sentence structure enables you to create emphasis on particular themes. So a really good example is in 2004, then, I believe, Senator Obama, but eventually President Obama, gave a speech at the Democratic National Convention, and the way that he did that, or at least one component of it, was he would say, there is no red America, there is no blue America, there are the United States of America. There is no religious America, there is no atheistic America, there are the United States of America. There is no blue-collar America, there is no white-collar America, there are the United States of America. And so by establishing that parallel sentence structure, i.e. it always ends with there are the United States of America, but he varies in terms of the particular binaries that he uses, he's able to establish a theme of we should not be divided between two things, but instead united within the common breed or creed of being Americans. Second is previewing and reviewing. A common phrase that's used when teaching public speaking is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you said. So what that means is you want to tell them the themes, the ideas you're going to present to them so that they know what to be looking for when they're listening to your speech. And then you want to review those themes. You want to say, okay, we talked about this, this, and this. And what this does is that it establishes very clear takeaways. And it means that it is more likely that that speech is impactful to them in some way. Third is inflection variants. People tend to get into pretty similar vocal patterns, and it gets pretty boring to listen to. So what I mean by this is that they will go with a particular pattern of the way that they say something, and they will just keep that pattern static as opposed to placing emphasis on different parts of their sentences or pronouncing things in different ways. So the way to do that is just to practice varying what you're saying more and more, and it will eventually become natural. However, you have to be a little bit careful about this because if you just do it constantly, it begins to be perceived as sort of arbitrary because you don't have a real reason for inflecting or pronouncing things differently or placing emphasis on particular words. And so you need to plan, where am I going to place my emphasis? Where am I not going to? Fourth is moving when you shift between topics. So let's say you're giving a more formal speech about a particular topic, for example, sanctions on Iran. And you have two different areas that you're going to be talking about. The economic effect on Iran and maybe the effect that it has on their development of their nuclear program. In that situation, you would want to take a few steps when you're going from the economic portion of the topic to nuclear political portion of the topic because those are such different areas of concern. And so by doing that, you're able to sort of shift the mental page that your audience is on when you are shifting from a different topic. Because if you just keep your feet planted the entire time, that distinction, that delineation will not be quite as apparent, and therefore what they get out of your speech will be a little bit less. The fifth area we're going to talk about within the do's is bullet pointing as opposed to scripting. The reality is that when we speak in regular conversation, we speak with irregularities. We make certain mistakes. So while you want your speech to be more formal than a regular conversation, you don't want it to be so perfect that it is inevitably perceived as being unnatural. Ultimately, you're trying to create a certain sense of a bond between yourself and your audience such that they are receptive to what you're saying, which means that your speech needs to be somewhat relatable to them. So how I advise doing this is creating bullet points and then practicing giving your speech using those bullet points.
Thank you so much, Nevin, for your wonderful insight. You're listening to your radio of choice, Radio Caravan. Thank you for the privilege of your time. Today, we're learning more about public speaking. We heard the do's from two rising seniors in the first half of our show. Make sure to keep that pen and paper handy as we hear about the most important don'ts of public speaking. First from Tanya and then from Nevin.
So when it comes to don'ts, I would say that these are actually much harder to do than the do's. So I would say if you can actually remove them from your public speaking, then you will be on your way to be a solid public speaker. So my first one is actually quite commonly said. It's to remove using interjections such as and like. These interjections often come off as signs that the speaker is inept. And even within conversational sounding presentations, they're not really that welcome. My second don't is don't remain monotonous and stiff during your presentation. Because humans often respond in kind to expressive presentations. And shutting yourself down during a presentation will lower your perceived charisma and audience interaction. Also, don't talk too fast or too slow. Maintaining a consistency is key to relaying your information to the audience. If you talk really fast, but you increase your speed, that will make your audience clued in that you might be nervous. Also, don't switch between ideas or topics, as this will often lead to the audience being confused and your presentation seeming incoherent. And make sure all your points lead back to whatever initial thesis you had.
So first thing that people tend to do is distract their audience. And they do it through a lot of different ways. They can use excessive hand gestures. They can move their feet while speaking, likely as a result of nerves. They can use filler words like etc. And what this tends to do is just detract from your message. And you don't want to do that because people have limited attention spans. And if they're focusing on your hands or your feet, they're not focusing on what you're saying. The second area is failing to make your audience invested. And while this is the last thing that we're going to be talking about, it may indeed be the most important. Because if at the beginning of your speech, your audience doesn't feel a real reason to be invested in what you're saying, they aren't going to be later in the speech because people listen to primarily the beginning of what you say and the end of what you say. So one way of establishing an immediate connection between yourselves and your audience is humor. It's a really effective way of breaking the ice when someone comes on a stage. It's just generally a really good way of making yourself relatable. Another way of doing it is establishing some personal relationship that you have to your topic. So maybe you had an experience with it that makes it particularly important to you or highlights certain aspects of what you're going to be saying. So establishing and providing that personal relationship can be another effective way of making your audience invested. The final way, if both of those strategies you don't believe will be particularly successful, is just establishing the importance of your topic. So maybe you're talking about the importance of ending fueling of Saudi Arabian aircrafts by the United States. So maybe you give a really shocking fact about the way that has an effect on Yemeni children, etc. So that's one hyper-specific example, but generally there are many ways to make your audience invested, and you can play around with them, but the key is establishing at the beginning of your speech why the audience should care about listening to you. So ultimately, whether you're giving a speech in front of 6 to 10 people in a casual setting, or whether you're giving a formal speech in front of 100 people, I hope that you've taken a little bit of my advice and will maybe implement some of these things, and good luck, because speaking's hard, but it is not an unconquerable task.
Thank you so much, Tanya and Nevin, for your very helpful insights into the do's and don'ts of public speaking. I hope y'all enjoyed today's show. If you missed a show, that's okay, because the Kids Hour with Anya is now on an iTunes and Spotify podcast. Just search Anya Ahuja and DM me your song request at my Instagram account at Anya Ahuja 01. Stay happy, stay connected, stay active, and stay safe, everyone.